Hello, all. Welcome back to our weekly portion review. And this week we are in the portion of Vayeshev, literally translated and he sat, but more means and Jacob settled. And really, every year when we read these closing parshiot, these portions of Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis, we encounter this very raw and emotional, deeply human even world of Joseph and his brothers. And these chapters hold some of the Torah's most really dramatic scenes, as we're going to see in the next weeks. But we have the dreams that provoke jealousy, and a plot that really nearly ends in the murder of Joseph. Joseph ultimately goes to Egypt, and this is a very complex, painful journey that eventually leads to reconciliation. But really, beneath the family dynamics, there's a universal question that I would say echoes throughout the generations, which is, are we forever destined to be in this conflict between brothers? Now, this portion really forces us to look honestly at the nature of division, the challenges of truth, and even the spiritual process required to reach real peace, real shalom. So now this brotherly love, whether it's among children like the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, or in humanity as a whole, is not something that the Torah treats as obvious or simple. Right? From the very beginning of the book of Genesis, the Torah places sibling conflict at the center, really, of our human story. Right? We have Cain and Abel. We have Abraham and Lot. We have Isaac and Ishmael. We have Jacob and Esau. And then we have Joseph and his brothers as well. So the entire book of Bereshit, right, which would mean the book of beginnings, is filled with brothers who cannot yet live in peace. And the Torah really insists that we cannot leave the beginning, as in the Bereshit, the Reshit, the start, behind until this tension is actually resolved at its root. So as long as shalom is absent, right, so long as we avoid confronting these deeper fractures, history itself can't truly begin. We can't move into the book of Exodus. There's nothing to talk about yet. So when the Torah states that regarding Joseph's brothers, it says in Genesis 37:4, "V'lo yichlu dibro shalom," right? They could not speak to him peacefully. And this sounds like a moral failure. But Rashi, right, the famous commentator and the sage, reveals this deeper truth. He tells us that really from their shame, that like we see that they couldn't stand him, we actually learn their praise. Why? That they didn't speak one way with their mouth and another way with their hearts, right? They wore their feelings on their sleeves. They weren't playing any two-faced situation going on over here, right? They had this inability to speak peacefully. Was not because of hypocrisy, but it was actually because of integrity, right? That they were actually men of truth and they were incapable of pretending. So ironically, because they start from truth, because they refuse to cover the conflict with polite lies, they were ultimately capable of real reconciliation. And by the end of the book of Genesis, the brothers achieve a genuine, healed unity. And the Torah is teaching that it's actually counterintuitive, but essential for us to understand this principle. Peace is not achieved by avoiding conflict. Peace is built on if a peace is built on denial, it's not really peace. It's actually just a delay. And hugging people or gestures, agreements that have this superficial harmony to it can't actually replace the difficult work of examining what's at the root of the pain, the root of the jealousy or the misunderstandings, or what's the root of these competing visions or fears. And real peace requires courageous honesty and not just emotional or spiritual shortcuts. And this is exactly where this extraordinary gift as Jews, right? Because we know that Maaseh Avot Siman Lebani, meaning the deeds of the ancestors foreshadow the destiny of the children, right? Our forefathers actually were archetypes for us. The Torah gives us this spiritual insurance policy, right? That you will fight, you will misunderstand each other, you will come close to even destroying each other at times, as we've seen in many times, even at the destruction of the temple. But at the end, you will make peace. And this is a painful process, and our identity gets tested, and old wounds resurface. But this promise really remains that at the end, the brothers will understand each other, and real peace could be achieved. And this is not just history, right? This is the spiritual architecture of the Jewish people. And the message of this portion couldn't be more relevant today in Israel, right? We're again at this moment of brothers and sisters that can't always speak to one another in peace, as the brothers had. And different versions and visions of the country for Judaism, for democracy, for security, for our actual identity, these disagreements, they actually run very deep. And at times they could also become explosive, as unfortunately we've been feeling. And it's tempting to demand a superficial unity or to hide these fractures with slogans of temporary compromises. But the Torah teaches us that, again, unity that ignores the truth is not going to last, and peace that denies real differences is not actually peace. The only path forward is courageous honesty. We have to be patient. We got to listen, of course, and the willingness to struggle together rather than walk away from each other when things get hard. And just as Joseph and his brothers had to pass through this pain before reconciliation, so too we have to do this. But again, we have to remember the promise that the Jewish history never ends in division. It ends in a deeper unity, a unity that emerges specifically because we confronted our differences rather than avoiding them. And this is the hope of our portion, and this is the hope of our people today. And as Joseph, in a few portions, ultimately tells his brothers after Jacob dies, he says, don't worry, this was all God's plan ultimately. And I feel I only have love for you as well. So on that note, I'm wishing us all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat of unity. Take care.